Ever feel like you're drowning in a sea of marketing tools trying to keep your business running smoothly? What if you could simplify it all with one platform? That's where Go High Level comes in, your all-in-one sales and marketing solution built for small businesses like you. In fact, Go High Level has over 1 million users just like you. With Go High Level, you can capture leads, automate your prospect and client journeys, quickly and efficiently build stunning websites, sales pages, and sales funnels. Imagine managing your CRM, email, SMS, and funnels without duct taping a dozen tools together. Plus, their unlimited plan lets you add as many contacts and users as you need, no hidden fees. We've been using Go High Level for over a year now and absolutely love it. In fact, Profit First Nation is also powered by Go High Level. Ready to level up? Start your Profit First Nation extended 30-day free trial today at www.gohighlevel.com/Profit First Nation. That's www.gohighlevel.com/Profit First Nation. Streamline your workflow, impress your clients, and grow smarter, not harder.
Welcome to Profit First Nation, the official podcast for entrepreneurs who are operating their businesses in the zone of permanent profitability. I'm Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, and now here's your Profit First Nation guide, Daniel Mulvey.
All right, Alexis. Well, tell us, and we're so excited to have you share your journey about how you sort of walked into or ran into or maybe ran away from Profit First to start.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And firstly, thank you very much for having me on the podcast, Daniel. I really appreciate it. And I think for me, the journey of Profit First, like I was familiar with Mike Michalowicz's books and I think reading Clockwork and so on. But Profit First for me was probably the biggest. I mean, game changer is often used too much, but like it really did make such a huge difference to my business and also my life. So I think it started off with, I think I'd probably read something like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and done kind of lessons around that and kind of got this concept from the books like that book and similar ones that I should be thinking about how I'm saving money and putting money in different pots and how I'm approaching finance out of my business, and particularly that I'm making sure that I'm in a secure place financially. I had no idea how to do that. And it was when I then read Profit First that I then got clarity on how do you put yourself in a position that initially provides security and over time has made me comfortable and put me in a position where I can be rich. And that was like, for me, that was like what I'd learned previously. It was like this secure, comfortable, rich thing, but I had no idea how to do it. And Profit First gave me the ability to even understand that, but also, importantly, communicate it with my business partner and communicate it with my life partner, my wife. And the way that it happened was first for me to identify, in line with Profit First, the target allocation percentages and to review what we were currently doing and whether we were putting money aside. And I was really encouraged from Profit First with that concept of it's fine if you don't immediately jump to the taps that are outlined. The important bit is to start on the journey. And I think that is often underappreciated in so many areas of our lives, both in personally and in business. We know each other through a lot of work that we've done on processes and so on, that often business owners talk to me about, I need to solve all of my processes. And I say, no, we need to start off with one. And it's amazing that once you solve one problem, how that seems to have this ripple effect. And I think that's so true in aspects of your business and in your finances, where you start to put that money aside, you start to have these allocations where the money is put aside. It suddenly gives you some sense of sanity and it reduces the stress that's associated with it. And so first I applied it in the business and it helped me and my business partner get in a much better position financially there. And then I actually applied it in my personal life as well. And that also had huge impacts.
So, I mean, you mentioned, sharing it with your business partner. And, it is, I was in a similar situation too when I read Profit First, because it wasn't my opinion versus their opinion. We just decided to agree on Mike's system and such. And so it wasn't like a battle of who was going to win. We agreed to let Mike Michalowicz's Profit First dictate how we're going to manage the cash in our business. So you read Profit First, and did you immediately run to the bank and open up your bank accounts? Like what was your feeling about like then starting the implementation process? Was there some,
I think
6 months?
yeah, so I think initially I probably attempted to do it virtually, which I think is quite common, is that people say, oh, well, I won't create the actual accounts. I'll just like work it out and manage it in a spreadsheet. And I got some benefit from that, to be fair. Like even just the thought process of working out like where are we in terms of our allocations versus where we should be was a useful exercise. But then I think relatively quickly I realized that this was becoming complex and painful, and I was becoming a bit lax with it. And so as a result, I did then, fortunately, I was able to set up a series of bank accounts pretty quickly. I think on the app version that I had for that particular British bank, which at the time was relatively far ahead of others. Nowadays, that's just a normal thing that you can do. And so, yeah, so I remember setting them all up. It's not to say it's not been without its problems. I've had occasions where all of the nicknames that were put against each of the bank accounts just got wiped, and they all just got changed to current account saving. Oh, no. But fortunately, by that point, I'd got a finance administrator. I could just say, "Oh, can you tell me what these are all called?" Or they're all recorded in zero, like with the names. So like, it's not to say that you don't occasionally get little glitches, but it changed everything in terms of then being able to see at a glance and have a proper conversation with my business partner, because I've always been essentially the notional CFO in the business, and yet felt like I was a smart CFO in the sense that I could talk well about the numbers and had basic maths, and had even gone so far as to being able to understand a profit and loss and a balance sheet and so on. And yet when my business partner would ask me questions about the future of what we can do in the business and how much money we should be making and all that kind of stuff, I kind of felt I can only give broad brush answers. Whereas I felt like I could give the past of the business through the normal accounting instruments, right? And so yeah, I think setting up those accounts probably happened within a few weeks or months of initially trying to do it in spreadsheets, when I realized that it just didn't work that way. And then I think personally, I probably then did that within maybe a year of then having it in the business, when I hit a particular issue and was like, ooh, I wonder where the Profit First can help. And it did, which I'll happily go into more.
And it's been several years since you've implemented Profit First. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd have to look back and see exactly, but yeah, we're talking at least 5, probably more like 8 to 10, I think. So yeah. I can't remember the exact published date of Profit First, but yeah, it's probably not far out off shortly after published date, because of course I'd read Mike's previous book, so I'd have seen it come out and got it and so on.
And so by getting an understanding of where your cash is actually going and how it's being allocated, and then having some intention now with your different pots that you're allocating to and such, you started to build some capital within the business, right? That allowed you to make those further investments versus just spend.
Exactly right. And so I think the 3 things that happened as a result, I would say the first one was we got much more security in the business and reduced the stress. Because rather than just every month we didn't know quite what was going to happen, and oh no, we've got to do the tax bill now, or oh no, we've got this cost, and oh no, there's the annual payment for that software that we forgot. And like all of that stuff was so stressful before, and that went really quickly once we'd kind of got that system in place. It also reduced the stress around the conversations with the business partner around feeling strapped for cash. Like that's one of the natures of growing the business is you're purposefully doing it lean because you're saying, well, we've got to grow, but at the same time, you're feeling this tension between you. And in fact, I was talking to another business owner who he and his business partner, they started a business together in different stages of life. She had recently had children. He wasn't at that stage yet. And actually, financially, he was in a worse position than her. So she'd put money into the business. And so after like 8 months of working together, they got to a position where the business might not carry on existing. And the tension where you've got someone who has got young family and a £15,000 loan into the business and a business partner going, yeah, it's just around the next corner, is really painful regardless of what's going on. And I think having the pots and the clarity of what was happening financially, and both having that and being able to see it in the past, but knowing what it was going to look like in the future, made things already reducing the stress and all that sort of stuff. But then over time, what it meant was that we were putting this money aside for ourselves. We were making sure that we were paid well as as managers in the business, but then also having this profit account and that increasing over time, and having our sort of safety net account, which is also increasing. And so over time, we got to a point where our cash was representative of more than 12 months of monthly costs. So we knew that we could, if revenue went to zero, hypothetically, without reducing costs at all, which would be crazy, we could go for 12 months. And so
and you had this implemented before COVID too, so I'm sure that it
which was important. Yeah, so I remember in February 2020, so my business partner and I, so all of our companies are entirely remote. My business partner now lives in Sweden. We both used to live in London. We've moved because we now live with our families, both got kids, etc. And so we meet up once a year for our annual general meeting. And if you're going to need to travel anyway, you may as well meet in the Alps and do some skiing, right? So that's what we do. And it actually works really well because you're able to have quite tense discussions on a chairlift as you go up, and then relax and think about it when you like ski or snowboard down, and then get on the chairlift and go, actually, I've thought about that. I do agree with you. Or actually, let me explain my position from a slightly different standpoint. So we do that. And I remember this particular annual general meeting, February 2020. And I remember getting into the car to go to the resort with him. And I said, just before we dive into the strategic stuff, I think this virus in Wuhan might be a problem. And he said, really? That thing in China? I was like, yeah. And because I've been reading some book about the maths of and how human psychology means we don't tend to see the hockey stick lines and the doubling and exponential growth. We tend to draw straight lines. And I had started mapping out these numbers and going, oh, this is concerning. And so I, on the plane, had put together a model of what does it look like if our revenue drops 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, and what do we do in each of those scenarios, and what does our cash allow us to do, and so on. And so I remember in the taxi reviewing that with him, and then we spent the rest of the time going, okay, but I might be wrong. The financial markets haven't even responded yet. As a result, let's now work on the basis that doesn't happen. So it's interesting. But what was really great was that in those conversations, yes, I'm working out, okay, here's how I would reduce our costs, etc. But at no point was there any concern like, oh, the business could go bust, because the cash reserves were such that we'd be able to, we'd have enough time to adjust our costs accordingly, even if it meant basically mothballing the entire company and whatever, and communicating, look, this is what we've had to do. I could still see how we'd be able to mothball for a period and come out the other side and still be absolutely fine. And that's an amazing thing. Like, if you think about, for us, that was the worst case scenario that we could have, because for our customers, for one of my software businesses, for SpiderGap, which is this 360-degree feedback tool, like, a lot of customers just in HR were saying, tell you what, we'll just pause on doing any employee development stuff because we've got to deal with furlough or redundancies or people moving to remote working. So can we just pause? And we wanted to support them. So we're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we get that. And so you'd pause it for 3 months and then 6 months and then 9 months and then 12. And of course, all your revenue just gets shunted along that timeline. So it was huge. We had a massive, I think it was probably I think on balance, it ended up being 40% drop in or 50% drop in revenue for a 6-month period. But we were able to manage it. And it meant that over the course of 6 to 9 months, we managed to get to we were break even, which is incredible. And cash flow meant that we were able to be really confident with all our stuff, which was the other thing that was really important to me. Is very early on, I wanted to be able to say to our team, like, we've got you. Like, I didn't want them to feel like, oh, okay, during this global catastrophe, that this was an employer just go, look, we can't survive. Like, this is a blip that we're gonna die from. As a result, you're gone first. And so we were able to manage it and communicate with our staff about that. So that was huge for us in terms of having that level of security. And then out the back of it, when we had managed costs and so on, such that actually we didn't erode our cash reserves that much, it enabled us to then use that cash reserve to invest to build another software product, which is what we then built in AirManual, which is largely solving the problem that we had solved ourselves in our own businesses.
Yeah. So let's just talk, like, and then we'll transition into more about, like, you are the king of efficiencies. But so with Profit First, the only two ways to increase profitability are to increase margin and or decrease expenses. And so you can pick decreasing expenses or increasing margin or both to share how once you understood that, what changed in your business.
Yeah, so I think if I go back to when we first implemented it, one of the things that it shines a spotlight on when you're starting to do these percentages is it kind of prescribes you what your costs should be. And you can kind of work backwards to that to then break it down into budget lines for, okay, well, I know broadly to run this business how that needs to break down into people costs and software costs and hosting costs and marketing costs and bank fees and so on. And, I know that, for example, my payment processing and bank fees and all that sort of stuff is going to be around 1.8% of my revenue. There's stuff I can play with, but basically it's going to be that. And that's true for a few factors, except for something like payroll, where actually that could be all over the place, depending on how much resource. And what was amazing is it told me how efficiently, essentially, I needed to run the business, or how much I needed to change pricing, etc., to make sure that there was sufficient margin. And so having that information was critical, because when you know how much cost and profit there needs to be in your business, it becomes easier to make decisions about things that traditionally as business owners we really struggle with. For example, a lot of the firms I work with, including I work with a lot of professional services firms like accountants, often people feel uncomfortable about charging more for their services. And it's one of the most common things you'll hear at industry events and webinars and whatever is, you're not charging enough and you need to double your fees. And they go, but I love my client and I don't want to do that and I don't want to hurt them and I worry that I'll lose business or whatever. And it's useful to work the other way around when you look at your costs and then say, well, but I need to, like, a business like mine should have this amount of profit in it and be putting this side aside for tax. Therefore, my revenue should be this, and then work backwards. And that forces you to then work out the answer. Because that's the amazing thing I've always found, is that the human brain's ability to work out the answer when it's got the question is incredible. The problem is not having the question. If you've not asked the question of how do I get to this level of profit, etc., your brain doesn't work on that.
Yeah.
But as soon as you do, it does.
So thanks for that segue. I'm gonna throw in a little commercial here. Join me for one of our Saturday advisory sessions. They're free, and that's where you can come in live and either be the one that I reverse engineer your business, or be the fly on the wall watching me reverse engineer someone else's business. But that's exactly sort of like the method to the madness is reverse engineering and understanding where you want to go, and then what it's going to take to get there, and what it looks like in terms of raising prices. I've done this so many times, and oftentimes people are like, "Oh, I can't charge that much." But then when they start to see how the numbers align and they make those increases, it's just like, oh my gosh, like it transforms their life, it transforms their business. There are people for whatever price range. And here's the irony: people who pay a higher price are usually much easier customers than the customers who want the low ball price, because the customers who want the low ball price honestly just can't afford it. And you want a customer who is going to be a lifelong customer, appreciate the value, and be able to afford your services. So go to the link at profitfirstnation.com, where you can register for one of our Saturday advisory sessions. And again, that's where you see the magic of Profit First and exactly what Alexis has done, and countless other business owners who have successfully implemented and mastered Profit First in their business. So back to the show here. And okay, so it helped you realize both of those things in terms of margin and efficiencies and employees and such. Let's talk a little bit about how AirManual came about. And I love cleanness, simplicity, just straightforward. And when I came across your software, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, it was like, wow, like not overwhelming, does everything that you could possibly want it to do. But I have to say that I think the big game changer for you guys and other software platforms is that you really hold the hand of your clients, and you set them up for success. I mean, you have a great, amazing team of consultants and advisors who just really help you maximize why we sign up for the software. So many people sign up for software and then it sits on a shelf. I'll get to it. But the way you guys are structured, you actually help your clients get to it. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Because I think that it's probably helpful if I explain why we created AirManual, what it is, and so on. So if I go a little bit way back, was that I always wanted to start a business. Like, I was always interested in entrepreneurship. When I was 12 years old, I was like already starting businesses, right? I was creating newsletters and selling them around the village. I was washing people's cars and getting paid like 50p and so on. I needed advice on pricing at that point, by the way, which I did not get. And so I was doing this work, sweeping drives and mowing lawns, but I couldn't work out how to grow those businesses beyond just me. And I used those examples slightly tongue-in-cheek as a young child, but actually it didn't change even as I got older. I studied business studies at like A level, which is like age sort of 16, 17. I went to university and studied management sciences and for 4 years, and also ran my own businesses during that time, selling peripherals, and even did a deal with the early days of Skype, and did all sorts of stuff, which sadly no more. But it's like I was entrepreneurial, and unusually so back then. And so I think objectively now, if I look back, there's a lot about the template of that young man who he's going to be next Google, next Microsoft, next Apple, whatever. And that wasn't ever going to be the case for two really big reasons. The first, which held me back really early on was that I couldn't work out how to delegate and get things off my plate so that everything wasn't just me. And partly some of that is pricing and business model, but a lot of it is just fear of delegation, struggling to delegate. You know, when I did hire initially my friends and then other people and virtual assistants and whatever, I could never make it work. I'd always found that it would take more time for me to do it with them than just do it myself, because I could work really quickly and get stuff done. And I remember back when I was a manager, I became a management consultant partly because I couldn't work out how to build businesses successfully beyond just me. And so started learning how to help big businesses redesign their processes and be more efficient and leverage their people better. And that's where I learned how to combine people and process, and how even, I was working with large corporates and government agencies and whatever, who would themselves say, yeah, we don't necessarily have the best people. And yet I was seeing this incredible scale and profits and whatever. I was thinking, well, how can you do this then? And so it's there that I learned, when you combine people and process, that's where you can do some amazing stuff. And so I then felt like, okay, I can go start a business and I can go again at this. However, one of the experiences I had at that management consultancy was a line manager who told me that he thought I'd never be a good line manager. And the reason he said that was because he said, well, you don't take people with you. Like, you're very fast, you can think ahead, you can come up with these amazing ideas and so on, but you don't take people with you. And so I don't think you'll be a good people leader. And so you might want to reconsider what that means for your career and your ambitions. Now that hit really, really hard. It meant that I was even more fearful of managing people. It meant that when I then left and started my own businesses, I avoided hiring wherever possible, and instead, using books like the 4-Hour Workweek, etc. I was like, oh, well, perhaps I'll get contractors, and then I won't have to manage them or like have any conversations with them. They'll just do the work, and then my terrible ability to manage won't be a problem, which it was absolutely a problem. I even had a bookkeeper who hired that way, who stopped working for me, and I only noticed about 3 months later. So it's, you do need to manage people, at least a basic amount. And I've had way worse other stories like that where just, through neglect, I lost good people. And so I learned there that, when that manager gave that feedback, I was fearful of management. Whereas now I look back and I go, actually my line manager was a bad line manager. No line manager should say to someone, I don't think you can ever do this. They should be looking at, what do you actually want to do? And then work backwards to say, okay, what's it going to take to get there? How can I support you in getting there? And so I now look back and go, actually, it was probably one of the best things for me to do was to experience the pain, not of the line manager meeting, that wasn't necessary, but the pain of doing a bad job of hiring and managing, because it meant that I had to work out how, despite my natural ineptitude and incompetence, how I was going to make that work if I was ever going to grow a successful business. And it enabled me to actually solve that problem, which I did, and then grew my business to 7-figure revenue and 6-figure profits and so on, without it dependent on me day to day. But then I've been able to do that subsequently for others through the medium of AirManual, because initially when I was showing other people how I'd done it in my business, they're like, that seems complex and you've had to bolt together a load of stuff to do it. And so we built AirManual to try and make that as frictionless as possible, which initially was through a software platform. But as you say, we then found that actually people need more hand-holding and support. And so probably one of the biggest innovations has been working out what's the lightest journey that we can go through to deliver incredible impact. And that it's always been helpful to us that our number one core value is focus on impact. So as you've experienced, Danielle, like we always start with like, what's the outcome that we want? Like, what's the biggest pain point? What's the cause of stress or frustration or whatever? And then let's work backwards from that. What actually needs to happen to remove that? Because often you can get 80% of the effort for 20% of, 80% of the value for 20% of the effort. So let's do that. And so, as you say, we do that hand-holding to support business leaders to get processes documented and handed over and get their team empowered to be able to continuously improve it so that you can kind of step back and add more value. But I feel yeah, it's been an interesting circle to go on in my career to solve a fundamental problem that I was genuinely properly terrible at doing myself initially.
And I just want to say that you say people and processes, and it's like they go hand in hand. And you talked about, oh, I could just do it myself. I was just faster at it, this, that, the other. But you're only one. You're only one, Alexis. But when you combine your knowledge and you put it into a process, into a system, then you can multiply yourself. And I think that's where people really miss it, because just like Profit First, having that process and system, you don't have to really think about it too hard. The cash is just managed automatically in your business. And when you have that process and system in place, it's taken away the stress. It's taken away the I don't know. It's taken away, and it's giving you clarity about things, because there is that process and system that is just running in the background consistently and such. And so I think with AirManual, it gives you such a platform to document your processes and systems. And if you, especially, I just want to kind of point out here too, because we recommend AirManual to our members of the 5-star employee hiring system, because it's so important when you make a hire that you onboard that new hire efficiently and quickly, and you are getting them up to speed fast. Like week 1, they should be at 50 miles an hour. And by like week 4, 5, or 6, they're at 100 miles an hour. You don't need to give them 90 days. You don't need to, but by having this in place, it really just makes such a difference. And I know, sometimes it's pressure that actually ends up making them have to do this and such. And you worked with one of our members, Cindy, and she gave us big accolades, thanks to you, only because we recommended you. But they were facing an employee that had a significant diagnosis, and so they needed to get some stuff documented ASAP so that could take off what they were working on, and your team helped them and got it done quickly and efficiently, and just was such a tremendous she says lifesaver to the situation that they were in. And said again, I love how I get connected with entrepreneurs like you and like Cindy, who care about your clients so much. So just an extra little feather in your cap there about what you've built with AirManual, and how you guys have really I think transformed the way people think, feel, and act when it comes to documenting the processes and systems in their business.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that speaks to our core purpose, right? Like I'm fortunate that in my other software business and in consultancy and so on, I'm in a position where, frankly, financially, it probably would have been more sensible for me to just stay on that and not do AirManual. For me, AirManual represents a very big purpose play, which is to solve that problem of people having stress and being stuck in their businesses. And that is both for leaders, but also, hardworking, loyal members of teams who want to be able to go on holiday and not have to take their laptop, or, have their honeymoon or whatever important moment in their life. And yet, because other team members can't do what they do, aren't able to do so. And so, it's the same reason we created the De-Stress Your Business podcast and had you as a guest on it. And you were fantastic. We talked about hiring 5-star employees and so on. But the entire concept behind that podcast is all about, like, how do you take the stress out of it? How, as you say, in a case like Cindy, where you've got a team member that's in that position. And in fact, I'll speak to that as a particular example, because I think it's often misunderstood that there's an assumption that, so we've got this team member who's going to have to leave the business for a period while they deal with their health and, etc. And as a result, it's the rest of the team that are then going to have to rally around, and how do we help them? And whilst that is true, my observation is your best people, your 5-star employees, your A players, they actually, like, even if they're given a significant health diagnosis, they will feel so loyal that they will hurt themselves and their families to try and protect you and your team and your business. And I think most leaders out there believe in a greater purpose and want to do good things for both their clients but also their team. And if you're putting your team in a position where they have to do that despite the negative impact, particularly at perhaps one of the worst moments in their lives, that, like, I think we're then failing as leaders. And so I've had that in my own businesses with a team member who went through a very horrendous sudden bereavement. And you want, as a team, just to be able to go, don't worry, we've got you. That even in my business, that team member was like texting going like, here's a situation. And I'm going, oh my God. And saying, oh, so I don't think I'll be able to come in tomorrow. And, you know, I've got some calls. You know, and that's in a business like mine where everything is documented, where, you know, everything's shared, everything's in the CRM. So I was able to just say, don't worry about it. I've got all of it. I won't expect you in the office for at least 2 weeks. And even then, all I expect is we'll just catch up and we'll just see how things are going, and then, you know, and come up with a plan then. But go be with your family, do what you need to do. And you want to be able to do that for your team, both in the bad times and the good. And so for me, that's, you know, AirManual. It's very much the heart of what I believe for leaders, for teams, and so on. But one of the other things I want to loop back to is something that I really like that you said around why you've referred clients to AirManual in the past, is because if you're hiring or attempting to hire and improving your recruitment for 5-star employees, firstly, you want to get them up to speed really quickly. If you hire A players, 5-star employees, and don't do a good job of onboarding, the risk is that they bounce off you. And so you don't want that. But the other thing I've seen is actually there are other processes in your business that you need to sort out as well. And in fact, I was talking to an owner of an accountancy firm only today. So they've got 80 people in the firm, and they are in a position where they feel the culture is pretty toxic. And in fact, they are really, the way that they described it was that they feel like they work with a recruitment agency and they feel like they're getting the bad eggs, and that often they're ending up hiring bad eggs and having to lose them from the business. And they suspect partly is they haven't got a good selection process. So that's one process that, you know, that you do a great job on. But then the other thing is that there's a perception in the industry, and particularly from the recruitment agencies they work with, that they're a bad employer. And as a result, the people that get sent to them are the, in their words, dregs that aren't the best ones to work, like aren't the best employees. So how do you deal with that as that accountancy firm going, okay, we're trying to get great people, we're having to resort to using recruitment agencies, etc., to get this, and yet we've got this terrible reputation. And so you look at, so why have you got a bad reputation? And the answer is appalling processes. They haven't got effective processes for how they manage performance, how they exit employees, or how they deal with complaints and grievances. And so as a result, they have a reputation of not really looking after people, or kicking people out of the business in very bad, negative ways, you know, basically constructive dismissal, all these sorts of things, and not looking after and developing and supporting their people and so on. So as a result, of course, you don't attract great people, because as much as you might improve your advert, if the perception out there is that you're a terrible employer, it's going to be really hard to change. Now, working with them is going to be a challenge on solving some of the problems, but I know that one of the first things they're going to have to solve is those underlying processes, because perception can't change until the reality is fixed in their case. And so I think you're absolutely right. Like, when you're trying to improve the people, so yes, you want good processes. Yes, you want to make it easy for your people to do things the way you want them done, and you want to make it easy for managers to do a great job. But if you want great people, like in the way that you do with your getting the 5-star employees and so on, you need to up the level of your game as an employer to be able to attract and retain great people as well.
So if you don't mind just piggybacking on that about the onboarding, I'm going to tell you this, that we actually are having our clients get their onboarding plan done before we post the job, because when you post it's all about time, guys. And if it's a great candidate, they're going to be sniffed out by other people. They didn't just apply to your company. So you've got to like start with the onboarding process. You've got to start with what you expect them to do so that when you flip on the switch and it's time to hire and you take them through your hiring gauntlet, you take them through the 5-star fit method and you make that hire, you're ready to bring them on and onboard them and then to your point, they have to have a great onboarding experience because here's the other deal. Again, they didn't just apply to your job. So if they start with you and it's a rough week or 2 or 3 weeks, their applications are still live out there in the universe. They can't say, oh, I've been hired, disregard. No, they're already out there. They're working through other employers' systems who maybe were just a little slower than you. So they're still getting interest based off the applications that they had already put out there. So you are at risk easily of someone saying, you know what, this is not all it was set up to be when I interviewed with them. And so I'm going to take this other job that just called me and interviewed me and seems to have their act more together. So onboarding is so important.
I really like that as a point, and I completely agree. I want to share an example which is both tragic and funny to illustrate that. Because one of the things that I often see is when people think employee onboarding, some people think, oh, that's the HR contract stuff, isn't it? And it's like, it includes that, but it should no way be limited by that. I tend to think of it as it starts off when the candidate accepts an offer, and includes everything from agreeing your start date and, sorting out all the contract stuff, yes, but also perhaps sending them the welcome gift and making sure they're clear on what's going to happen on their first day, sending them reading resources or things that they might, your values and your mission.
Get them excited.
Exactly, getting them excited, and then making sure they're welcome and their first day is amazing and that they've got all the tools that they're going to need to do their job, and that you're not going, oh, let me find you a desk, and oh, I think you can use Sally's laptop. Does someone know Sally's password? Like, you need to make all of that smooth. But I remember speaking at an event where one of the attendees said, oh, it's almost like time to competence. That's what we're aiming for. And it's like, yeah, you're going from them accepting the offer all the way through getting them really engaged and excited, all the way to they are competent in their role. And you want all of that as part of your onboarding process. And I completely agree, Danielle, that needs to be set up in at least some form. And note that, like, the way that we tend to do it means that it's possible to do that in like 3, 4, 5 hours, sometimes less, because we've got templates and so on that we use as a starting point, and get that to a point that it saves you weeks of hand holding and spoon feeding of your values and all these sorts of things anyway. But to illustrate the impact, like, I was working with a firm where before we started working with them, I was asking, like, what are the sorts of problems? Give me some examples. And they said, yeah, so we hired someone and we had a few options and so on. And we got someone to accept an offer, which was great because they looked like an A player. And so we said, great, and we agreed the start date. And then we had to shift all around a load of work because they wouldn't start for 3 months because they had to work out their notice, which we kind of thought, well, that's fine. Like, they're working, they're doing their notice, they'll do 3 months, and we've got to move our work around anyway because we've got these clients working with different managers and it's a manager role. So they start shifting on the work around. Anyway, 1 week before the person's start date, they're all ready, they've moved all the work, they've briefed the clients, and they go, right, speak to them and say, by the way, we just need to sort out your payroll records now. And they go, oh no, I haven't heard from you for 11 weeks. So as a result, I assume this wasn't happening and I've accepted a role somewhere else.
Ouch.
And there you go.
It's true story.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so as a result, what did that firm do? Did they fix all their processes and onboarding and so on? Nope. They hired a terrible manager who could start the following week. And then spent the next 9 months regretting it. And it's like, yeah, this is why you've got to sort out the process, because when you do, it's faster. Like, I think too often people assume, like, oh, first I'll do the thing, then I'll sort out the process, then I'll document it. You won't. It's like, if you miss the deadline for submitting your homework at school, do you then do the homework after you've missed the deadline and it's already been marked as done? Of course not, because it's too late. So don't try and fix a recruitment process and an onboarding process after you've made your hire. Fix those things, then put the hire through it and improve the process as you go along. And next time it'll be even better. And our experience has been actually the Pareto principle is relevant here. A few hours to get a good process in place is amazing rather than spending 6 months to get a process in place, because actually you want it good enough that you can use it, which means you can continuously improve it as you go along.
And just like Profit First, it's an iterative process. It's not set it and forget it. You're
Awesome.
adjusting the percentages every quarter, and so like something is better than nothing, and then you keep improving upon it, like you say. I just the other thing too about, so it's all about the wow factor, because you're right. An employee remembers their first day, and that's the day everyone is excited in their friends and family network. Oh, how did it go? And so you want them to be able to share, oh my gosh, it was great. It was fantastic. You don't want them to be like, well, it was okay. And start to plant those seeds of doubt, like, did I make the wrong decision in the hire? But then again, too, you want to have a clear plan to get that person trained and up to speed, up to 100 miles an hour quickly. Yeah. I think companies are way too slow and start people off way too easy. And it's much harder to get them to where you want them to be when you start at 0. You can't get them up to 100 miles an hour if it just like they start to get comfortable around 50. That's why you have to start hitting the ground running at 50 miles an hour that first week, and then incrementally quickly getting up them to 100 miles an hour and setting that expectation. Because again, you need an employee who's doing providing a 3.5x minimum return on their payroll and salary. And so that starts out of the gate. Yeah. And that's why you need processes and systems documented in AirManual, so that can essentially take the new hire through the expectations and get them to hit the ground running, because oftentimes no one has time to like train people and sit there. And so when it's documented, it is like on autopilot.
I completely agree. And it's funny. It reminds me of, I was speaking at an event and I was running this as like a workshop session where I was taking this group of business leaders through like our approach of how do we extract someone, how do you take a leader who's stuck in the day-to-day and take them out of out of that. And you start off with actually just give them the basics of how do you hand over a process, any process, regardless of how complex it is. How do you get that out of their hands? And we do that. And then the second one is, okay, now how do you take a series of processes, tasks, etc., and that are packaged up as a role, and how do you turn that into onboarding so that actually a new team member or a new person taking that role, or someone that's promoted into it or whatever, how do they then self-serve and go through that journey to get set up? And I remember as part of the presentation, I said, typically we aim for getting time to value, like as you said, like the 50% where they're actually delivering value and you're like, yeah, this is good. Like, yes, you expect them to improve. Yes, you expect them to take on, but they are delivering something of significant value. We aim to do that within 2 weeks of them starting. So for example, for my customer success team members across both of my software businesses, I'm expecting that they're able to do demo discovery calls with potential clients within 2 weeks of their start date, which means that they're delivering value to us as a business and they're learning more and delivering value and so on. And within another week, they're able to cover 80% of all the support queries. And within another week, they're running consulting workshops and all these sorts of things. And so very quickly we're delivering that value. And I remember at this particular workshop I was running, there was this leader who she had her arms crossed and she was shaking her head and so on. And so I said, I'm sorry, is there, like, do you have a question or something, an experience you'd like to share? And she said, in my business, it takes 9 months for people to get up to speed. And I said, because I wanted to like assume the best. So I was like, oh, presumably you're talking about like to get them to 100% though, not to getting value. And she said, no, we don't even let them do anything in the business until they've had that 9 months, because it takes them so long to like learn it. And the business owner right next to them said, if that was the case in my business, I'd go out of business tomorrow. My team members in my industry, they typically only stay 3 years. Like if it's going to take me 9 months before I get first day of value, and I've already spent 9 months of cost, I can't make this work. And you're exactly right. Like you need 3.5 times value on your team members. And yet I've seen it over and over again that 9 months, or in some cases 3 months, whatever, can be shortened so much. And in fact, I'll share exactly how to do it, because I think that for a lot of people, like actually the tangible thing will be helpful. So the way that we think about it is we say, first there's company onboarding. That's any role, any part of your business, they need company onboarding. It's your values, it's your vision, it's the meetings that they would expect to have, who else is in the business, what are your ways of working, where do they find the processes, all those sorts of things. Like just the stuff that everyone needs to know. And you want that not to be something that a manager in your business has to spoon feed, because they'll do it differently every single time. You want most of that self-service, and they can go through it. And we've got templates that people can get to give them a starting point. But broadly, that should take a day or 2 days for your employee to complete. And that includes setting up all of their systems as well. You don't want them to then start doing customer calls and go, oh my God, I haven't got access to the CRM. Like all of that should have been covered really early on. Then you want team onboarding. So if there's anything that's specific to your team, like let's say you're in the sales team, and that means that you need access to particular sales dashboards and all those sorts of things, and what are our sales targets and so on, then you need that onboarding. So learn who our sales team is, learn about our objectives, all these sorts of things. Then you might have role onboarding. So perhaps within the sales team, maybe you're an inbound sales rep or whatever. As a result, there are things that you're not going to need to learn yet about account management or outbound sales or other roles that sit within the sales function or team. And so as a result of those steps should help you get to competence. And what we recommend is that people start with what's the first big piece of value that person could be delivering in your company. So for example, for customer success, for me, it might be demos, or for a developer, software developer, it's like they need to be able to commit code. And how quickly can we get them to that point in a way that they can competently do it? Because 5-star employees want to be delivering value. They want to be making an impact in your organization, and they will feel uncomfortable and demotivated and frankly worried if they're not doing that early on. And no matter how much reassurance, if you just say, oh, don't worry, it'll take 9 months, your best people will just leave. So as a result, work backwards from what's the value that they can be delivering, how quickly can I get them there, what do they need? And then exactly as you say, Danielle, don't stop there. Work out, okay, then what, then what, then what? And it might be that actually that role, like they're at 100% in that part of their role. Like let's say in my case, inbound sales, doing demos might be just that. But then it's like, okay, once they've done that and once they're confident doing that, then we can start them on, say, account management. And so that will then have its own role onboarding that we pick up and say, okay, great, you're now successfully set up as an inbound sales rep, you're hitting your targets, you're doing fantastic, well done. As you know, as part of your role, we expect account management. So as a result, you're now going to start the onboarding for account management, and we'll take you through that journey. And when you have it broken down like that, firstly, it makes it easier as a leader and a manager to be able to even explain someone's journey in your organization confidently, but it means that that's the case for the employee as well. That exactly as you say, when they're asked by their friends, ex-colleagues as well, like, how did it go, what's going on and whatever, they can talk enthusiastically about it. And it's one of those things that where we've had people leave our organization, good reasons, and we keep in contact and so on. Often one of the things that they will complain about the most or say is so weird to them is when they go somewhere else and it's such a terrible onboarding experience. And in some of them have come this close to being like, I know it was for the right reasons, but I kind of regret leaving. And so in many ways, I'm encouraging them. I'm saying, no, come on. You can't expect everyone else to be quite like this. Don't worry. Stick it out a little bit longer. This is the right, this is the right step for you and whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's such a negative impact if you don't get that right.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, if you're at all wanting to get your processes and systems documented and dialed in your business, like now is the time. It is hot. Don't wait for a terrible diagnosis to happen. Don't wait for, something tragic or someone, getting a windfall inheritance and saying, see ya. You really need to just get on it now. And so make sure that you check out airmanual.co. That's airmanual.co, and connect with Alexis's team of amazing advisors and consultants who can really just help you make this magic happen in your business that will, transform your ability to scale efficiently and maximize the employees that are in your company currently or future hires as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Alexis. We will have a link to airmanual.co at profitfirstnation.com under our community tab. And thank you so much for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been really fun. I know that we could have chatted for hours more. Indeed, we have, just not recorded. So yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if anyone wants to reach out, has got questions, etc., feel free to reach out via social media, and all the usual channels. And of course, do check out De-Stress Your Business, the podcast, which you can find at destressyourbusiness.com.
Hey, this is Ro, and if you're a business owner struggling with hiring or just tired of doing it yourself, I highly recommend the Build Your Dream Team Secret Podcast series. There are 7 episodes packed with real stories from founders who've cracked the code on hiring, built high-performing teams, and finally got out of the day-to-day grind. My favorite part? It's not fluff. It's systems, strategy, and results. Text DREAM to 55444. That's DREAM to 55444 to check it out. You'll thank me later.